Welcome to the Lovestead.
Hi BookTube, welcome back to Lady Lovestead Reads. My name is Jessica and this is my May 2022 reading wrap-up. Let's start with a few statistics first. In May I read 9 books. 5 of them were physical books, 4 of them were ebooks, and 0 were audiobooks. I read a total of 2,355 pages. 8 books were fiction, 1 was nonfiction. For star ratings, I had 0 1 stars, 2 2 stars, 2 3 stars, 3 4 stars, and I had 1 5 star. For target audience, we had 0 middle grade, 3 YA, 1 new adult, and 5 adult. For genre, 3 thrillers, 2 literary, 1 nonfiction, 1 fantasy, 1 romance, and 1 classic. Let's go ahead and chat about what I read. First was Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. This is an adult thriller and I read it as a buddy read with my friend Angel from Reading Past Bedtime. I will link Angel's channel information down below. We read this as part of the Spring Fling-a-Ween, which is a readathon hosted by Olivia at Olivia Reads a Latte and Gabby at Gabby Reads. And the goal of that readathon is to read spooky books and basically, bring a little bit of Halloween throughout the year because there's going to be a Summerween coming up here soon too. So it's a fun readathon to partake in. Reckless Girls is about this group of people who go to an abandoned island or like an uninhabited island near Hawaii. And when they get there, there's already a couple of people there already. And so they all become friends and they stay on this island for a couple of weeks and things happen because it's a thriller. And I really enjoyed this book. I love thrillers where the characters are all like dark and broken people. And I just like books in general with dark and broken people. So there's that. I love an unlovable character. And this book did have some pretty unlovable characters, but overall just had some really complex characters that I liked. The plot was fun. There were some really spooky moments. And even though at the time I had not read Lord of the Flies, as I was reading it, it was definitely giving me some Lord of the Flies vibes. And then later in the month I did read Lord of the Flies, and having read Lord of the Flies, I can say if you like that one, you will probably like Reckless Girls. I gave that book 4 stars out of 5. Next, I read Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. May was AAPI month, and so I read this to read some AAPI authors, and I really like Sayaka Murata's Convenience Store Woman, so I picked up Earthlings, and it was a trip. Earthlings covers some of the same themes that Convenience Store Woman does, the themes of capitalism and motherhood and womanhood and feral humanity. And it really takes a look at what happens if we just strip away all of society's expectations, rules, and norms and go back to living as feral humans. And it's a trip. It is a trip. And I absolutely loved it. The way that it builds is something else because it starts out pretty grounded in reality, and by the time you get to the last third of the book, you're just like, what the heck is happening, in the best kind of way. So I did give this one 4 stars out of 5. It is an adult literary fiction. I think that it also is a bit genre bending because it could also be considered speculative horror. Next, for AAPI month, I read Woman Eating by Claire Coda. I actually won this book in a giveaway hosted by Jan at Jan Agaton, and this was for her 3K giveaway. Jan is amazing. Her channel is blowing up, and I'm so thankful that she hosted this giveaway and that I won. Thankful to the publisher for sending it along as well. So very thankful. That being said, I didn't like this book. So Woman Eating is adult literary fiction, and it's coined as a literary vampire story. So this is about, I don't even remember her name, Lydia. Lydia is a vampire, and Her mother is very sick and she's in an institution. Her mother's also a vampire. And Lydia has always depended on her mother to find her blood to survive. They don't drink human blood, they drink pig blood. But her ability to access and find pig blood has been quite diminished with her mother being in this institution. And so it's just about her trying to find blood so that she can eat. She is an art student and she is interning at this art gallery where there's like some shady characters, and it just is kind of a slice of life story where nothing really happens. And I feel like nothing is really said in this book either. I think that Claire Coda could have gone a little bit deeper with some of the ideas that she was trying to tackle. It felt like she just started to get into one of these ideas and then she'd pull right back out again, and never really took us there. You know, it stayed very surface level, like she's just sort of observing Lydia from the outside and watching what she does in a day and reporting back on it, kind of. We don't get a whole lot of that like character growth happening. We don't really get to know any other characters very well either. Like they're very just like observed rather than explored, and I didn't like it. I think that Claire Coda has real potential as a writer because her prose is pretty great, but the story, the plot, the execution, the characters, it just didn't land for me, which is so disappointing. This is one of my highly anticipated releases for the year. So I did give this 2 stars. This will not get stamped and stay in my library. I will be unhauling this one. Very Bad People by Kit Frick. This is a young adult dark academia thriller, and it's about a young girl who goes to this fancy upscale boarding school, and her mother died in sort of a mysterious way. She drove their car into a body of water, and she and her sisters were able to get out of the vehicle, but her mother drowned, and she's got all kinds of unreliable memory about that particular event. So she goes to this school because her mother went to that school as well, and she's hoping that she'll get to know a little bit more about her mother and her mother's past. And some things happen at the school to trigger memories around the car accident, and she joins a secret society, and like there's a lot going on, and I really enjoyed it. I gave this book 4 stars out of 5. I thought that it asks some really interesting questions for teens. So as an adult, some of these things that were covered and explored are like, yeah, been there, done that for me as an adult. But as a teenager, they would have been like mind blowing. You know what I mean? So it was appropriate for its target audience. I loved the academic vibes. I thought the characters were really fun and interesting and complex. Again, appropriately complex for the audience. And the ending is kind of an open ending, which I actually really love, because the major theme in this story is the gray area between good and evil and the choices that we make on the day-to-day and where those choices fall within that spectrum. And so I think the ending is kept open because we have to decide where the characters are going to fall in the spectrum, and we have to think about, you know, what choice are they going to make. Really good read. I recommend it if you like YA and if you like dark academia. It's not as dark as like other dark academia out there, but it is age appropriate. So do keep that in mind if you read it. The only nonfiction that I read this year was The Clutter Fix by Shannon Atchison. This was an ARC provided to me by NetGalley, and this is about decluttering your house. I didn't like this book. I felt like she didn't add anything new to the story, that it compiled a lot of ideas that already existed, but none of them were very original. I thought the original ideas that she had were all based on her own privileged personal experience, and those ideas were not generalizable to a broad, diverse audience. For example, when she goes through the steps of decluttering your house, she's like, clean out your entryway, clean out your coat closet. And I'm like, only people with a certain size home even have an entryway or a coat closet. Like, the stuff, it was just wasn't generalizable to a broader audience. She also used some cherry-picked Bible verses, which I dislike. I don't mind Bible verses in nonfiction. I'm a Christian, so I don't mind that. But what does bother me is when we're not given the context of those verses and they're just kind of thrown in. It's cherry picking. I dislike that. And then there are also some moments of fat phobia in this book, which is completely unnecessary. In a book about decluttering your house, you don't even have to talk about bodies at all. So didn't land for me, didn't like it, 2 stars. Next, I read volume 14 of The Promised Neverland, which is a manga series I've been reading for a while now. It's about a group of orphans that escapes an orphanage that isn't what we think it is, and then basically are going through this dystopic process of trying to survive in a world full of monsters. That's the gist. This volume was excellent. There was a twist that made my jaw drop. Moving on. Next, Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark. This is book 2 in her Brutal Birthright Mafia series. I DNF'd this one. This is also the series on my series about series list, so now I'm feeling kind of iffy about continuing with this series. I will read book 3, but if book 3 doesn't knock it out of the park, I'm taking this series off my list. So Stolen Heir is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. The Beauty and the Beast elements are very heavy-handed, and I didn't buy the relationship. I didn't see why they liked each other, and I didn't like the characters. When I read a dark mafia romance, I want a dark mafia romance. This book wasn't really dark, and that's a criticism I had of the first one in this series too. It wasn't really dark. It was more like a rom-com with mafia elements, and this felt similar. Like, I want something dark and gritty when I read a dark romance. I want broken, messed up characters, and it wasn't giving me that. I just wasn't enjoying it. I got stuck at like the 40% mark and didn't want to keep reading, so I DNF'd. Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This is a classic, and it's about a group of boys who get stranded on an island and they have to survive. It's such a well-known classic that I feel like it's one of those books where we all know what the story is about without having to read it. But when I read it, I absolutely fell in love with the story. I think a lot of people are required to read this when they're in school. I wasn't required to read it. And I'm so glad that I read it as an adult, because I think if I had read this as a teenager, I would not have been able to appreciate it as much as I did reading it as an adult. I really think that this is like the founding of the modern day thriller, and it's so twisted and dark. The prose is excellent. The book that I had, the edition, had some really eerie, creepy, like illustrations in it that really added to the vibe. And it's a fairly quick read. It's not super long. I loved it. I loved it. I loved the prose. I loved the characters. I loved the plot. I love how tense it made me feel. And I gave it 5 stars. The last book I read in May was The Butterfly Garden by Dot Hutchison. And this is an adult thriller about a guy who collects young women in this greenhouse where he has them like captive, and he tattoos butterflies on their back. And he keeps them for a certain time and then does other things. And it's about following this girl's story where she is someone who gets kidnapped into the butterfly garden and everything that transpires from there. And I don't know, this was a fun read. I wouldn't say that it's a super well done book in general, particularly around logic. There were a lot of moments where I just wasn't understanding why XYZ didn't happen or why XYZ did happen. I couldn't really envision this compound where he was keeping the girls, because like it had to have been huge, and I couldn't like see the layout of it in my head to make it make sense, because it was like a compound with a greenhouse and a waterfall and a cliff within a larger greenhouse. And I was just like, this building has to be ginormous. And I couldn't like wrap my head around that. And it bugged me throughout my entire read of the story. And then the twist at the end I really didn't like. I thought it should stayed untwisted. But if I suspend all of that, if I don't think too much about it, if I don't think too much about like the logic and all of that, and I just immerse myself in the story, it's a really fun read. It's dark and twisted. Always check your trigger warnings. I don't share triggers because I think they can be spoilery, but if you are sensitive to things, always look up your triggers, because everything I read is pretty dark and twisted. So good read, like overall good entertaining read, but a lot of it just like didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I did give it 3 stars. And I think that people can still really enjoy this book. I think it could even be a favorite book for a lot of folks. I just got too bothered by some of those things for it to be a really high rated story. But, you know, I'll say that I did enjoy it. Like, it was fun. All right, those are the books that I read. Now, when I look at my goals, see how we're doing on goals. So I have a 5-star predictions list, and Earthling by Sayaka Murata was on that list. Didn't quite hit 5 stars, was at 4 stars. Still absolutely loved the book though. I read a book that was recommended to me in my anniversary video, which was Earthlings, which was recommended to me by Scott and Nelle. So thank you so much, Scott and Nelle. Loved it. I did work on my Serious About series list by reading Stolen Heir. I have a goal to read 12 classics this year, so I read Lord of the Flies, which was a classic. I had a goal to read more books from Kindle Unlimited this year, and Stolen Heir and The Butterfly Garden were both on Kindle Unlimited. And I have a goal to read something from my own bookshelves every month. And Woman Eating was from my own bookshelf, and Reckless Girls is a book that I had purchased on my Kindle. So those are the goals that I worked toward this month. My favorite book of the month was absolutely Lord of the Flies by William Golding. Let me know down below what your favorite book from May was. If you just want to let me know that you're here, go ahead and leave me a stack of books emoji. And if you are liking my content, make sure that you subscribe. Until next time, make sure that you read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!